Hello, and welcome to the second grade episode of Math Matters. My name is Mrs. Cook, and today we will continue our learning about repeating patterns. Let's get started today by doing this sense-making routine called Same but Different. Take a moment to look at both pictures shown here and think of all the ways they are the same. You may find it helpful to think about it using this sentence starter. They are the same because... Now take a moment to think about how they are different. Again, you may find it helpful to use the sentence starter. These are different because... I bet you thought of some great ways these pictures are the same but different. Let's see if we had any of the same ideas. These pictures are the same because they're both yellow and blue. They are also the same because they both have pictures of things that can be found in the sky. You might have also noticed that they're the same because they both have two pictures or objects that repeat over and over. These pictures are different because they have different shapes. One has stars and moons, and the other has a cloud and sun. Or maybe you noticed that the moon pattern starts with the yellow, and the cloud and sun pattern starts with the blue. Did you have any different ideas? You can share them now. Wow, you're really sharpening your reasoning skills as you compare how these pictures are the same but different. Thank you for joining me in our sense-making routine for today called Same but Different. You might have noticed both of the pictures were repeating patterns. We're going to continue our learning today by practicing describing and extending patterns. We will also deepen our understanding of patterns today as we learn how to compare and transfer patterns. As you follow along, think about how you're able to describe the core of a repeating pattern, extend a repeating pattern, label a repeating pattern, and compare and transfer a pattern to a different shape or object. We will have an opportunity for you to reflect on your learning at the end of the lesson. While you are working today, you will have an opportunity to practice your Portrait of a Graduate skills. You already showed that you're a creative and critical thinker by comparing pictures in new and different ways. I hope you'll continue to use that critical eye as we explore more patterns today. Remember, it can be hard to focus when learning at home, so do your best to remove any distractions so you can work hard to be goal-directed and resilient. For today's lesson, it may be helpful to have some paper and a pencil on hand so you can copy or make your own patterns. If you have markers or crayons, that can work too. We will pause now to give you time to gather your materials. Okay, let's get moving. We're going to continue our learning about patterns through movement today. I'm going to say these pictures out loud, and I want you to try doing these movements in the order that I read them. Are you ready? Let's try it. Clap, run in place, jump. Clap, run in place, jump. Were you able to do it? Were you able to follow along? Are you tired? Okay, maybe you're just warmed up. Let's review what we know about repeating patterns. Patterns are units of objects, or in our example today, actions that repeat over and over. Which actions did we repeat over and over? That's right. Clap, run in place, jump. We call this the core of our pattern. Once we identify the core, we can use it to help us identify what would come next. Let's act out our pattern one more time, but when we get to the end, you think about what would come next in the pattern. Here we go. Clap, run in place, jump. Clap, run in place, jump. Do you have an idea what would come next in our pattern? Did you clap next? That's right. The pattern would start over again with a clap. Next, let's learn how to name or label patterns. Labeling patterns can help us communicate our thinking and compare one pattern to another. To help us talk about the pattern we see, we can use letters to label each unit or part of the pattern. Let's begin with the first movement below, the clap. We will label the clap A. And each time we see that same movement in our pattern, we will give it the same letter A. Then we will label the next unit or movement in our pattern, the running in place. We will label it letter B. And each time we see the running movement, it will get the same letter B. Finally, we will label all of the jumping movements the same letter. We'll give them letter C. You may follow along by writing this pattern down on your paper. Now, when we want to communicate our thinking about this pattern to others, we can use the letters. For example, we might say that this is an ABC pattern because the core is made up of 3 movements that we've labeled A, B, and C. Labeling patterns can help us compare 2 or more patterns and describe how they are the same or different. Let's return to the patterns we found at home earlier this week and practice labeling them. You give it a try first. What letters would you give to the cups in this pattern? Use your paper and pencil if it helps to record. Did you say A, B, A, B, A, B? That's right. All of the blue cups are the same, so they get the letter A. Then the gray cups get the letter B. This helps us label our pattern. Let's try another one. What letters could you use to label this pattern? Did you say A, B, C? That's right, we could label this pattern A, B, C, A, B, C. Let's do one more. Use letters to label this pattern of spoons and forks. This pattern is A, B. A, A, B. I think you're really getting the hang of this. Let's return to our movement pattern from earlier. Remember, we said this was an ABC pattern. Now let's compare it to our patterns from home. Which pattern from home matches or has a similar core to our movement pattern? If you said the sock pattern, you are right. The sock pattern is also an ABC pattern, just like our movements. Let's use what we know about patterns to play a game of same or different. First, use your pencil and paper to label each pattern. Then identify the core of each pattern by putting a circle around it. Finally, compare the patterns and determine if they are the same or different. We will pause to give you some time to use these labels to write down the kinds of patterns that you notice in each of the examples. Let's go over the labels for these patterns. If you didn't have time to finish, that's okay. You can just do the work together with us. Let's look at the first pattern. A, B, A, B, A. What's the part of this pattern that repeats? That's right, A, B. That's the core of the first pattern. Now let's label the second pattern. A, B, B. A, B, B. What was the core of this pattern? You're right, A, B is the core. Now that we've labeled the patterns, we can compare them. When we look at the core, or the unit that repeats for each of these patterns, we can see that they are different. The first pattern is an AAB pattern with 3 units that repeat. The second pattern looks similar because it also begins with AAB, but it has a 4th unit that repeats. So it's different because it's an AABB pattern. Give it a try with these new patterns. Are they the same or different? Remember to use your pencil and paper to label the patterns first and then identify the core for each pattern. We'll pause here to give you time to do that. If you didn't have time to finish, that's okay. You can follow along as we do it together. Let's go over the patterns. Say the letters aloud with me as we label them. A, B, C. A, B, C. A, B. This is an ABC pattern because the core has 3 different pictures that repeat. Let's do the next pattern. Say the letters out loud together with me. A, B, B. A, B, B. A, B. looking at the core, we see that it's different than the one before because it's an ABB pattern. Once we identify the core of a pattern and we are able to describe the pattern using labels, we can use that information to transfer the pattern using different pictures or movements. Let's give it a try. For example, if I know I have an AAB pattern like this one, then I can use it to create a similar pattern. I can create a new pattern using different shapes, but that still follows the same AAB pattern. Now you give it a try. Can you create a new pattern that follows the same rule? Take a moment to label and find the core of this pattern, and then transfer that same pattern to a new set of shapes, or maybe you'd like to create a movement pattern. We'll pause here to give you time to transfer this pattern. This is an ABB pattern. Was the pattern you created also an ABB pattern? Tell us how you know. You did a lot of learning about repeating patterns in today's episode of Math Matters. First, we reviewed how to identify the core of a repeating pattern. Then we learned how to label patterns to help us compare and transfer patterns. How did you do today working towards our learning goals? Reflect on your progress by giving a thumbs up if you feel like you got it, a thumb in the middle if you're still practicing, or a thumb down if you need help from a teacher or someone at home. Mathematicians are goal-directed and creative thinkers. Take a moment to reflect on yourself as a mathematician today. Were you able to persevere and stick to the learning goals for today as we worked on patterns? Were you creative and able to think about finding solutions in a new or different way? What might you work on for tomorrow? Thank you for joining me for today's second grade episode of Math Matters. I'm Mrs. Cook and hope you will tune in for more math fun tomorrow.